Okay, so last night, I was digging through my dad's New York University law school file, and he was a Root Tilden scholar or scholarship student. He got his master's degree in law, but then he went on to get a Ford Foundation grant to study in Sweden for a year for his PhD in law, or it's called like a JDS or something. And I knew from Professor Christopher Simpson that the Ford Foundation grant has to be screened by the CIA through the Russia Institute at Columbia University. So this got me curious, and that's why I was digging through my dad's NYU file, and suddenly I found a letter last night that said this. I posted it on my blog. I posted the quote. I didn't. I occupy a curious relation to him. This is DeWitt Wallace, of a confidential nature. It must suffice to say he is interested in my professional development. So DeWitt Wallace was on the board of the directors of the National Committee for a Free Europe. He was the founder and owner of Reader's Digest, and he worked closely with the CIA. And he also funded Macalester College, where he was alumni with my dad. My dad went on to be the chair of the Alumni Association at Macalester, but my dad also oversaw trusts in Minnesota. So my guess is that my dad was overseeing the DeWitt Wallace Trust. I don't know this, but I have no idea if that's the case. But it appeared the letter was written by my dad to the dean of the law school to ask the dean to invite DeWitt Wallace to NYU Law School as a means of fundraising for the law school so that my dad would have more funding for his studies in Europe. And my dad did end up going to University College London for a summer program at University College London, and also he studied in Paris privately at the library there for I don't know, a few weeks or something, a month, I don't know, a couple months maybe. And so I started looking into DeWitt Wallace more, and we know that he had a very close relation with the CIA. In fact, I found a quote from the CIA saying that Reader's Digest has always cooperated with this agency on many stories and has never violated the confidence of that cooperation. And, um, so my dad did correspond with a Columbia University professor who was promoting this same kind of CIA ideology of free market, sort of like what would you call it? What they call it now neoliberalism, but essentially aristocratic sort of relations or whatever, feudalism, corporate feudalism, fascism. And I found this critique of the Committee of Free Europe by Professor Christopher Simpson, saying that they were promoting Nazi propaganda about the Soviet Union, which kind of makes sense because the CIA was relying on the Nazis for intelligence after World War II about the Soviet Union. And it's kind of ironic because I did have this discussion with my dad a bit. He said that I talked to him about Werner von Braun, and he was like, "Well, Alan, there was nothing wrong with Werner von Braun, or Alan Dulles was a good guy, that kind of thing." And so, yeah, my dad was really like considered a top leader in the Republican Party in Minnesota, and then he was trying to be a law clerk for Warren Burger, who became Supreme Court Justice under Nixon, but this is when he was the U.S. District Court um, judge. Um, so anyway, the other interesting thing is my dad wrote a paper on administrative law in the Soviet Union, and I remember my dad telling me how he drove into the Soviet Union and to write this paper. Or I didn't know he wrote a paper about it, but that makes sense. And then so then I found a CIA document stating that the administrative law conferences in the Soviet Union are so communist fronts when they hold these colloquiums on administrative laws in the Soviet affiliates in Moscow in 1957. So my dad went to study administrative law in the Soviet Union in 1960. 1960. So it would have been well known by then that he was going to, a communist front. The question to be considered this curriculum is a comparative examination of the different systems of control of administrative acts actually enforced, on which question an English, a French, and a Soviet specialist will speak. So that makes sense that he would then study in France, for the comparative law, because he was doing comparative law analysis. So he studied in Sweden. He actually was translating Swedish legal documents also. So he took advanced Swedish in Sweden, in Stockholm, and he got like an A and A minus. Participants in the committee have been invited to attend the colloquium. So this is a CIA document saying, well, this is obviously a communist front or whatever. So that would imply that my dad was going into the Soviet Union to study administrative law. He wrote a paper on it knowing full well, it was a communist front or whatever. And so to what extent this confidential nature, because I know that the CIA would recruit college students, and my dad would have been a, perfect recruit, but did DeWitt Wallace actually, he was obviously a CIA asset, but, um, I, for my dad's sake, I occupy a curious relation to DeWitt Wallace. That implies a job. When you say occupy a relation of a confidential nature, that implies a secret job of intelligence. It must suffice to say he is interested in my professional development. That corroborates that it's a profession of confidential nature. So, and then my dad goes into the Soviet Union to study administrative law when the CIA is knowingly saying that that's a communist front. So obviously the CIA would want to study it, and then my dad wrote a paper on it, which I cannot find. I'll keep trying to look. I'll look into this paper that my dad wrote. But anyway, it's pretty fascinating. I don't know, you know, what any more details than what I've posted on my blog here. And I'll get back to it. But yeah, he wrote some paper on Soviet administrative law that did not get published. He had several articles published, and he was a editor for a academic for the NYU Law Review. Anyway, that's pretty much it. But that's sort of like another layer to my dad's career, that he had this. He continued his relationship with McAllister, which implies to me that he was probably getting money from DeWitt Wallace at some point. He got money from him, and yeah, I have more details on my blog post. I'll put the link in the chat notes. Okay, thanks for listening or watching or whatever.